Liberal Party leadership hopeful Mark Carney, leading in the polls for that post, visited Kelowna today, taking some time to speak to residents of Kelowna, local Liberal supporters. In his speech, he leaned heavily on how he sees Mark Carney as the man to take on Trump in the current pressures we're feeling from the United States.
Can we influence Trump? A bit. A bit. And then we've got to pretend we didn't. But we've got to respect, part of it, we've got to respect, look, fentanyl is an absolute crisis in the United States. It's a challenge here, but it's a crisis there. And us doing what we can to help them with that is absolutely appropriate. And of course, securing our borders is in our interest as much as it is in their interest. What we can change, what we must change, is to be masters in our own house, in absolute control of our economic destiny.
Heard again from you about getting premiers together on these inter-provincial trade barriers. Will you force the removal of these barriers?
Well, look, we're a federation, and governments are elected and they make those decisions. I think there's a lot of goodwill, not just with the premiers and people who delve into the details of it, but with Canadians. You heard it in the room here today. I hear it across the country. People want one economy. And the job of premiers, the jobs of prime ministers, politicians is to respond to what people want. So people want progress here. We'll have the meeting. As I say, there's reason to expect that there will be progress. My view, and I went back to my prairie values, is you got to be ambitious. You have a meeting like that, if you're going to gather together all the first ministers, build on the progress that they've made, be ambitious, and deliver for Canadians what they want.
Mark, just talking about the tariffs here and how it would potentially affect Kelowna, what would be your recommendation for the Okanagan and BC?
Well, I think a lot of what we're talking about, and goes back to the question just there, the great produce and products. I mean, I don't want to just reduce it to the wine and produce sector, as important as they are, but having markets all the way across Canada, and then much more around the world. Secondly, I think that what we're talking about in terms of really building this economy, focusing on major infrastructure, focusing on housing, that's going to have the knock-on effects. And as well, returning to Canadians more of allowing them to keep more of their hard-earned dollars. And Canadians are smart; they'll know what to do with that money. That'll help Kelowna and the Okanagan Valley and value, if I may, across Canada. Last question.
Yeah. For Parliamentary Bureau here, your rivals have put out some pretty detailed policy proposals. You haven't specified a lot in detail of what you're going to do and how. I mean, you made a lot of generalizations.
I disagree with both elements of that.
How are you going to do some of these things you're talking about today?
Well, first off, one of the things is, I've spent a substantial portion of my life in policy. What I'm saying out here in ways that Canadians can understand and relate to their day-to-day life is all backed up by detailed policy. There's time and place to reveal all of that. I'll give you an example on the climate policy. That's probably as detailed as policy release as you're going to see during a leadership campaign, and it's more detailed than what we've seen from others, and certainly more detailed than what we've seen from Mr. Poilievre, who's spent his time and he has ample time to have released detailed policies, and he's come up with slogans.
Just that there are a lot of struggling industries in the Okanagan, agriculture, lumber, even the wine industry. Is the federal government leaving that up to the provincial government, or will there be help on the way?
Well, no, I think there's a couple of things. One is industries that are affected by the trade actions of the United States. It is the intention of the federal government. I have said this independently, but it's clear intention of the federal government that any measures that they take and any revenues from tariffs that are targeted to have maximum impact on the U.S. and U.S. decision-making will be recycled into the workers and the industries that are most affected. So there are some of those industries here who work there. But what we can do, last word, and I just want to re-emphasize this. Let's control what we can control. And what we can control is how we build this economy, how we come together and build this economy. We don't want to wake up every day and look at Twitter and try to figure out where the Americans' heads are at a given time. We'll negotiate when it's time to negotiate with the Americans, when they're serious, when they want to come to the table for the whole thing. But we're not going to wait for that. And we're going to focus, if I'm elected, on building this economy from the Okanagan out.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.